The next one is I was going to refer to the bill that Senator Hatch has put in. We have S-2152, Amy, Vicky, and Andy Child Pornography Victims Assistance Act. This is on the agenda for the first time and will be held over at the request of the other side. This is a bipartisan bill introduced by Senator Hatch and co-sponsored by me, as well as Senators Feinstein, Cornyn, Klobuchar, Whitehouse, Tillis, and Blumenthal. The bill is named after Amy, Vicky, and Andy victims, in which the most widely distributed child pornography. The names of these victims is in some of the most widely distributed child pornography in the world. It also creates a better system for compensating victims of child pornography and addresses the concerns raised by the Supreme Court's Paroline decision of 2014. That decision came in Amy's restitution case. The bill will establish more relevant and useful standards for the victims of child pornography who seek restitution from criminal defendants. It gives victims the alternative of a one-time, fixed, comprehensive payment from the Crime Victims Fund. The bill also requires appointment of a guardian ad litem for victims and allows them access to the images depicting them, which can be important for victim identification, expert testimony, forensic review, and treatment. I look forward to reporting this bill out of committee at our next executive committee. Senator Hatch and then Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. I guess that's good. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for putting this bill on today's agenda, and I'm going to thank you, and I want to give thanks to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for co-sponsoring this bill. It's a really, really important bill. Child pornography is a horrible crime that exacts a unique and lasting damage on the victims. The abuse in creating the images is only the beginning. The trafficking in those images means that the abuse never really ends. And most of the individuals contributing to that abuse will never be brought to justice. As the Supreme Court has put it, quote, every viewing of child pornography is a repetition of the victim's abuse, unquote. Victims need help to put their lives back together and deal with this ongoing harm. In 1994, Congress created a process for victims to seek restitution from defendants. That process worked reasonably well for more conventional crimes in which an identified defendant was responsible for measurable harm to a particular victim. But a lot has changed since then, since 1994, and the internet has radically altered the nature of child pornography trafficking, which has been quite interesting to me as I've followed it very carefully. In 2014, the Supreme Court made clear that the current restitution statute cannot provide meaningful restitution in most child pornography cases. In fact, a majority of child pornography victims who currently seek restitution end up with nothing at all. My bill today will change that. Under this legislation, a victim may choose to seek restitution from defendants or receive a one-time payment from the Crime Victims Fund. For those who seek restitution, this bill makes the process work with better criteria for judges to calibrate and calculate a victim's losses, and provisions that ensure victims will receive meaningful restitution. The reserve within the Crime Victims Fund will be supported by an assessment of all child pornography defendants. The bill also requires the appointment of a guardian ad litem for all victims of child pornography production, and allows victims the same access to evidence as defendants have. This is important for victim identification, expert testimony for forensic review and treatment. And this bill has been endorsed by many national organizations, including the National Center for Victims of Crime, National Crime Victims Law Institute, American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, and the Children's Justice Fund. But even more importantly, the bill is endorsed by the 3 individuals for whom it is named, victims in some of the most widely trafficked child pornography series in the world. One of them, who goes by the pseudonym Andy, is a Utah constituent. He writes, quote, "Victims like me need as much help as we can get, and this bill is going to make a big difference in our lives. I'm lucky, and so are Vicky and Amy and so many other mostly silent victims out there to have you on our side and everyone else on in the Senate. Just knowing that so many important people think that we matter, that the terrible things that happened to us as kids are being considered as all the way up in the Congress of the United States. Wow, that's a big deal and helps me live another day," unquote. Well, Mr. Chairman, I asked a letter from letters from Andy, Amy, and Vicky supporting this legislation be entered into the record at this point.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I want to specifically thank Amy's lawyer, James Marsh, Vicky's lawyer, Carol Hepburn, and Andy's advocates at the Utah Crime Victims Legal Clinic, and Professor Paul Cassell at the University of Utah, who took Andy's case all the way to the Supreme Court. Their assistance in developing this bill, drawn from their tireless advocacy for victims, has been invaluable. So I want to thanks again to my colleagues for standing up for these victims, and I hope we can get this bill out and that the full Senate will pass this bill, and we'll be well on our way to solving, at least providing the tools to solve some of the major problems that are just killing America in many ways. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your leadership, Senator Hatch, on that legislation.